Good morning. Um, I was going to ask you all how your inner work is going, but it can be a little difficult. Reggie, how is your inner work? We haven't talked to you for a while.
Yeah,
Are you being able to be mindful with your students and get them to be a bit more mindful of you teaching them sometimes?
sometimes it's difficult, very difficult. I don't remember myself, but I try to do it every time, and it's a nice place to do it.
Are you trying to get the students? I mean, he teaches high school. He teaches science and math in high school. Are you trying to get the students at all to do it? To try and get them to be more present in the class?
Sometimes I do small exercises, trying to get them to be mindful. Yeah, I do that.
How do they take that? Do they enjoy that, or do they look at you like, "What's he talking about?" Or
Half and a half, maybe.
okay, uh,
Yeah.
does some of them get it? Or when you mean half and half, is it half the time or half the class?
Yeah, half the class is interested on that, and half the class is playing, is watching their cell phone and
Uh,
stuff like that.
okay.
Hmm.
How's your inner work going, Sona?
It's going okay. I'm trying to be more aware, do more breathing. Breathing is helping like magic,
Yeah.
really, really. And just trying more to myself, do some exercises.
So when you talk about breathing, what in particular are you doing?
So basically, I'm trying first to breathe from my belly, and then I know other breathing exercises from panic healing, like turtle exercises, from one nose and the other.
Okay.
Yes, this kind of, and also to hold it in, or sometimes be aware in the intervals between them, and then let out.
Yeah. Yeah. I teach alternate nostril breathing to my clients who suffer from panic attacks and
Mm.
who suffer from extreme anxiety. Alternate nostril breathing, the way I was taught to do it is to use the thumb and the fourth finger, and you block the right nostril, and then you breathe out and in through the left. Then you block the left, breathe out and
Yes,
in,
it's the
block,
same.
breathe out and in, block, breathe out and in. And you do that for 3 to 5 minutes. And
Oh,
it
yes,
leads,
about 15 times like
yeah,
that.
it leads to a state of hemispheric synchronization.
Yes,
It causes the cerebral hemispheres in the brain to balance and to begin to
balance.
work in the same frequency.
They
So,
also advise before meditation so
yeah,
much.
yeah, it really calms the brain down. It calms the body down. It forces you to take good breaths. Another thing about breathing that's very important is our out breath. Our out breath isn't emphasized nearly as much as our in breath, but our out breath, we exhale approximately um, 70% of our body's waste products through breathing out. And, it's not flushed down the toilet, it's not sweated out. Most of the waste products from our body are breathed out. So, breathing out is very important as well. People who suffer from anxiety, they tend to breathe from the top half of their lungs and they don't breathe out properly. And so, for people who suffer from anxiety, I get them to do alternate nostril breathing. I teach them to do that. And there's another technique which is called 4-8, which you breathe in for a count of four and you breathe out for a count of eight. And then you
Mm.
breathe in for a count of four and you breathe out for a count of eight. And that, doubling the length of time that you breathe out really helps to detoxify the body, get rid of all of those biochemicals and everything that build up in our bloodstream that can, that can cause anxiety, that can cause panic, that can cause fear. And fear is very lung based. I have a client who is recovering from breast cancer, and she's introduced me. I came across it years ago. German New Medicine, a Dr. Reichhammer, in terms of the looking at the causes of various cancers. And he says that when cancer metastasizes to the lungs, or it starts in the lungs, it's fear-based. There's a terrible sense of fear, a terrible shock. Sometimes, for instance, a person will be given a diagnosis of breast cancer, and in that moment, they will have this terrible fear. And then that causes it to be metastasized into the lungs, because the lungs are the seat of fear and terror. If you can't breathe, if you have trouble struggling for breath, it produces a tremendous amount of fear. So just learning how to breathe properly, learning how to take nice, deep breaths in can really help. And why don't we begin with that today? Let's just become aware of our breath. There are a number of different things we can become aware of involved with our breath. The first thing we can become aware of is the sensation of air moving in and out. So we can become aware of the air flowing in through our nostrils, our nasal cavity, the back of our mouth, our throat, past our windpipe, into our lungs. And we can become aware of the sensation of air moving back past all of those points. So our vocal cords, our back of our mouth, our throat, our nasal cavity, our nose. So we can become aware and trace the sensation of air as it flows in and then as it flows back out. And then we can also become aware of the movement of the various muscles involved. The primary muscle, the engine of our breath, is our diaphragm. It's a parachute-shaped muscle just immediately under our lungs, and as it expands down the diaphragmatic cavity, it affects muscles in our abdomen, pushes our abdomen out. It also is connected through nerves to the intercostal muscles between our ribs, so it causes our rib cage to expand. So to become aware of the movement of the muscles involved, particularly the diaphragm, which is the engine for the movement of these muscles. And our lungs are like bellows as well. So when the diaphragm moves down, it's like opening bellows and it pulls the air in. And as the diaphragm expands back up, it's like closing the bellows and pushing the air out. So we can become aware of the sensation of air flowing in through our nose, nasal cavity, back of mouth, throat, vocal cord, and back out again. And we can also become aware of the movement of the various muscles involved, our diaphragm, abdomen, the muscles between our ribs. And a side effect of this is to become aware of our abdomen rising and falling and our rib cage expanding and contracting. So try to divide your attention, part of it on the sensation of air moving in, and another part on the expansion and contraction of these various muscles. And then another part just aware of your lungs opening and closing. Do your best to become aware of the sensation of your breathing, the sensation of air, the movement of muscles, the expansion and contraction of your lungs. And then let's just do a relaxation exercise. Let's just bring our awareness and bring our breath to the top of our head, to the crown of our head, and breathe awareness in and breathe tension out, the top of the head. And then let's move down to the forehead and breathe awareness into the muscles in our forehead and breathe tension out. Into our eyebrows, breathing awareness in and tension out. Breathing awareness into our eyes and breathing tension out. Into the muscle in the center of our nose, breathing awareness in and breathing tension out. Into the muscles in our face, our cheeks, breathing awareness in and tension out. Our lips, breathing awareness in and tension out. Our jaw, the muscles involved in our chewing that flow from our temple bone down to our jawbone, breathing awareness in and tension out. our jaw and our chin. Then moving down with our breath, breathing awareness in and tension out, our throat. And then our neck. And then moving down into our shoulders. Our upper arms. Our lower arms. Our hands and fingers. Our chest. Our solar plexus and midriff. And let's breathe a few breaths into our solar plexus and midriff. Just relaxing the solar plexus. Using our breath to relax our midriff. Just relaxing them deeper and deeper. And then moving down into our lower abdomen. Breathing in awareness and breathing out tension from our lower abdomen. And then moving up to our upper back and shoulder blades. Our middle back. Our lower back. Our hips and buttocks. Our upper legs or our thighs and hamstrings. Our lower legs. Our feet. The top and bottom of our feet. Our heels and toes. And then use our breath. As we breathe in, bring our awareness to the top of our head. And as we breathe out relaxation down our body to our feet. Breathing in awareness to the top of our head, and then breathing relaxation down our whole body. And let's do this a third time. Breathing awareness in to the top of our head, and breathing relaxation down our body. And I would like you to just take a moment and briefly scan your body. Perhaps become aware if there's any tension still remaining anywhere in your body. Just to use your breath to release that tension wherever it may be. Mr. Gurdjieff said it's very important to learn how to relax the body, to learn how to move our body into a nice, deep state of relaxation as quickly as we can. It's actually a foundation for inner work, the ability to just relax the body. And then let's move into a quick version of J.G. Bennett's 60-point exercise. Again, focusing on doing your best to relax these points of your body. So again, starting with the crown of the head, then moving down into the forehead, down into the right side of the forehead, the right eye, the right side of the nose and face, the right ear and the right side of the head, the right side of the mouth and jaw, the right side of the neck and shoulder, your right upper arm and elbow, your right lower arm and wrist, the top of your right hand, your right thumb, index finger, middle finger, fourth finger, baby finger, the palm of your right hand, then moving up to the right side of your chest, your midriff and lower abdomen, the right side of your upper back and right shoulder blade, your right lower back, your right buttock and hip, your right upper leg and knee, right lower leg and ankle, the top of your right foot, your right big toe, second toe, middle toe, fourth toe, baby toe, the bottom of your right foot, and then reversing this process and relaxing and breathing in awareness and relaxing the bottom of your left foot. And we're moving through this quickly. Your left baby toe, fourth toe, middle toe, second toe, big toe, the top of your left foot, your left ankle and lower leg, your left knee and upper leg, your left hip and buttock, the left side of your lower back, your left upper back and shoulder blade, the left side of your abdomen and midriff, your left upper chest, your left palm, your left baby finger, fourth finger, middle finger, index finger, thumb, the top of your left hand, your left wrist and lower arm, your left elbow and upper arm, your left shoulder and neck, the left side of your jaw and mouth, the left side of your head and left ear, the left side of your face and nose, your left eye, the left side of your forehead. And then just move with your breath as you breathe out. Just allow your awareness to go down the right side of your body. And as you breathe in, bring it up the left side of your body, breathing your awareness out and down the right side of your body, and breathing in up the left side of your body, down the right side of your body, and then up the left side of your body. And then again, become aware of your breath. And I was thinking about this week how to properly begin to teach this exercise that I did a little bit with last week. And it's involving the breath and becoming aware of the difference between feeling and sensing. And we can notice the difference, particularly in our extremities. Mr. Gurdjieff had an exercise where, he wanted actually to hold 3 fingers and one to contain thought, the other sensation, and the other feeling. And I thought this was masterful because we can notice feeling, the blood-borne air aspect in our limbs better than we can anywhere else in our body. And we can particularly notice this feeding of our body with air and oxygen in our extremities, so in our hands and feet. So become aware of your right hand. And as you breathe in, we can notice this most especially on the in-breath. Become aware of an atmospheric quality, perhaps a shimmering or a slight soft reverberation, or there are a number of, these are just synesthesia, the overlapping of senses. It's really feeling, it's a different quality, it's blood-borne, but I use words like shimmering, like an atmospheric quality, like an air flowing down our hands. Try to become aware as you breathe in of this atmospheric quality flowing down your right arm and into your hand. This shimmering, this soft reverberation, this atmospheric quality, this something that's different. It's got a different qualitative aspect than sensation. And it is easily or easiest noticed with our in-breath. So breathe in and try to observe this in your right hand. And then breathe out. And then breathe in and try to observe this in your right foot. And then breathe out. And then breathe in and try to observe this in your left foot. And breathing out. And breathe in and try and observe this in your left hand. And I'm just going to say breathe in and we'll move around again. So breathe, feeling in to your right hand. And then breathe, feeling in to your right foot. And then breathe, feeling in to your left foot. And then breathe, feeling in to your left hand. And we'll do this again. Breathing, feeling into your right hand. Breathing, feeling into your right foot. Breathing, feeling into your left foot. Breathing, feeling into your left hand. And we'll do this a third time. Breathing, feeling into your right hand. And then breathing, feeling in to your right foot. And then breathing, feeling into your left foot. And then breathing, feeling into your left hand. And this time, we're going to add on the out breath, the sensation of the limb that I talk about. What we're going to do is we're going to breathe, feeling in, breathe it into the right arm, and then breathe sensation out the right leg, and breathe, feeling back in the right leg, and then breathe sensation out the left leg. Breathe, feeling in the left leg. Breathe sensation out the left arm. Breathe, feeling in the left arm. Breathe sensation out the right arm. Breathe, feeling in the right arm. Breathe sensation out the right leg. Breathe, feeling in the right leg. Breathe sensation out the left leg. Breathe, feeling in the left leg. Breathe sensation out the left arm. Breathe, feeling in the left arm. We're going to go one more time, breathing sensation out the right arm. Breathing, feeling in the right arm. Breathing sensation out the right leg. Breathing, feeling in the right leg. Breathing sensation out the left leg. Breathing, feeling in the left leg. Breathing sensation out the left arm. And breathing, feeling in the left arm. And we're going to go around again, but as we breathe out, say the word am, and as we breathe, feeling in, say the word I. So breathing out the word am into the right arm, and then breathing, feeling in as the word I into the right arm. Breathing am out the right leg, I into the right leg, am out the left leg, I in to the left leg, am out the right or the left arm, and I back in to the left arm. And I'm going to be silent. I want you to just try your best to go around your body. So you breathe I in one limb, you breathe them out the next in the sequence. You breathe I in that limb, you breathe them out the next in the sequence. You breathe I in as feeling, you breathe them out as sensation, and just move around your body, following your own breath, doing this as best as you can. Do it now. And then just allow your attention to rest. And we're going to do our best now to breathe feeling into the solar plexus. So become aware of your body. Sense your whole body as one organic whole. Be aware of your body from the bottom of your feet up to the top of your head. Sense your body as one organic whole. We went around, we did the breathing down, we went around with the 60-point exercise. Really do your best right now to inhabit your body. And then as you breathe in, represent to yourself, using your head brain, represent perhaps breathing in particles of light, particles of awareness, the active elements of the air we breathe in. This is a head brain exercise. And as you breathe out, represent to yourself, imagine breathing out a gray, foggy waste. So the head brain, the visualization, using the imaginative faculty of the head brain to visualize the active elements of the air, perhaps as particles of light, and then to visualize the breathing out as a gray, foggy waste, the sensation of self with the body brain. So aware of the whole body as one organic whole. And then as you breathe in, imagine something flows into your stomach, that quality that perhaps you could feel in your limbs, that shimmering, effervescent, atmospheric quality, that feeling. As you breathe in, or feel it flow into your abdomen, into your solar plexus, not your abdomen, your solar plexus. And then as you breathe out, feel it flow down to your reproductive organs. So breathing in and this feeling flowing into your solar plexus, and as you breathe out, it flows down to your reproductive organs. So to try to be aware of all three of these processes at the same time, the shimmering and the gray foggy waste, imagining with your head brain, the sensation of yourself with your body brain, and to be aware of that atmospheric quality, that vibration, that different qualitative awareness of feeling flowing into your solar plexus, and then as you breathe out, descending into your reproductive organs. And I'm going to be silent for, again, a few breaths. Just try to do this on your own. Try to become aware of these three different aspects involving your head brain, your body brain, and your feeling brain. And then just allow your awareness to relax. And I want to say that, this is all a prerequisite, because ultimately I want to lead up to something called the 4 ideals exercise that involves breathing, a quality of prayer, a quality of atmospheric, I can't describe it right now, but into each limb, and then distributing this throughout the body. But it's very important to begin to distinguish between sensation and feeling, and to become aware of that atmospheric. It's not a shimmering, because that's a visual metaphor, but it's a feeling that's like a shimmering atmospheric quality that we can particularly notice in our hands and our feet with the in-breath. So just allow your attention to rest. And this is very advanced in the Gurdjieffian exercise schema, but there is such an emphasis that Mr. Gurdjieff places on learning to distinguish sensation from feeling. And this is something that is so hard to teach. You have to experience it within yourself. You have to notice the qualitative difference between sensation and feeling. Now, we're going to close with the collected state exercise. So become aware that your body has an atmosphere. Collect this atmosphere. Keep it contained. Keep it about a meter, meter and a half. Do not allow it to be dispersed. Our atmosphere can be dispersed to the other side of the world if we allow it. Do not allow that. Keep it contained. Become aware of the border of your atmosphere. The atmosphere is composed and it can be disturbed by your thoughts, by your sensations, and by your feelings. Become aware of it. Keep it contained. Keep it calm. Keep it serene. Keep it around you, as I said, a meter, meter and a half, like a bubble or an orb or a sphere, or it's really more like an oblong sphere. Keep it contained within those limits. Become aware of its border. And in a moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 3. And when I get to 3, breathe your atmosphere in. And then as you breathe out, imagine, represent to yourself that something from within the atmosphere stays within you. And these emanations that stay within you then go to help coat your higher being body. 1, 2, 3. Breathe your atmosphere in, and as you breathe out, imagine something remains. Represent to yourself something remains that then goes to coat your higher being body. And let's finish by silently repeating after me. May results of this exercise be transubstantiated within me for my being. And then, I muted a bunch of you. I'm going to unmute you. Any comments? Any questions? Are you able to talk, Ian, again? No, we can't hear you. No. I'm not sure why. Any other comments? Reggie?
It's nice, very relaxing. I was trying to sleep because, it works. Like I told you, I've been working with that exercise that you tense and relax, tense and relax.
Okay.
And then now it's more accurately. I don't feel that. I don't imagine feeling. I sense it.
Okay, can you, you can't feel, can you feel an atmospheric around your hands and fingers especially? Or is that it takes a while. This is a very advanced exercise, but I want to introduce it, particularly to the online audience. There's so much confusion, so many questions about what is feeling as opposed to sensing. And this is this is how I learned it years ago. I became aware of that quality around my hands and fingers, that sensation. Sana, can you perceive that? Can you notice the difference between sensing and feeling?
Yes, I don't know how to say it in words, but I do feel it. I do totally feel it. And this exercise was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to, the exercises I have online, I'm going to do this one, eventually write it up, put it online, like I have my other exercises as a standalone exercise. But I'm rehearsing with both my live group and this group, just trying to, feel my way to a way that makes it understandable, that people can begin to pick it up. Because I think this is very important when it comes to actually doing the 4 ideals exercise, which is a very advanced exercise. And we breathe in through our limbs. So we breathe an ideal in through each limb, and then we merge those around our body. And Mr. Gurdjieff said the 4 ideals, for instance, imagine Jesus above Jerusalem, Muhammad above Mecca, the Buddha above India, and Lama above Tibet. And imagine breathing in those qualities, those atmospheric prayers that people make that don't quite reach it, and breathing it into our limbs, and then allowing it to flow throughout our body. And so, any other comments? Any other questions? It's unfortunate we can't talk to Ian. Ian, is your microphone on when you go to the left side of your screen? Down at the bottom, it's on? Yeah, okay. Because Ian always has such insightful comments, and it's unfortunate just to have him there mute in the for the talking. So for the last couple of meetings, what I've been focusing on is self-observation. I talked about how we've got to begin to learn to categorize what is going on within us in that particular moment. Is it a thought? And a thought is always comparing. A thought involves comparison. Is it a feeling? And a feeling always involves pleasing or displeasing. Is it something that's moving? Is it, reaching for a door handle, or stepping up steps, or walking down the street? Our moving center involves learned movements. So a learned movement, for instance, is speech. Speaking involves the vocal cords, the mouth, forming phonemes. So involved in speech is very much a moving center phenomenon, but speech is very complex because it also involves the intellectual center. It also involves breath and breathing. But talking is partly a moving center phenomenon. Walking, sitting, standing, lying down, getting up. And then we have our instinctive. And the moving and the instinctive are actually part of the physical. And the instinctive, Mr. Gurdjieff said, awareness of the color green. There's no judgment involved in the color green. That's an instinctive perception. Awareness in the body of whether or not the body's hot or cold, or actually, pleasure or pain, a prick, or, a stroke. That's part of the instinctive center. It's just an awareness. I've recommended perhaps going into a supermarket or a grocery store and consciously attempting to exercise these different things, to use our moving center, use our instinctive awareness to become aware, for instance, of the color of some apples, and then to use our moving center to pick up 2 apples, to use our emotional center to recall the joy and the sweetness and the joy we may feel from the sweetness and the memory of biting into an apple, and to use our intellectual center to compare one apple to the other. One may have a bruise or a brown spot, and to begin to try to exercise this awareness, to ask yourself, is this the moving center? Is this the emotional center? Is this the instinctual center? Is this the intellectual center? Is this a comparison? Is this a feeling, pleasing or displeasing? Is it just movement? Is it simply an observation? The color green, the color red. And then I talked about orage is exercise, where he said, there are a number of variables to look at other people, to think of a friend, someone you know fairly well, and to do your best to objectively describe them. And there was a list of characteristics we should look for, their food, their pleasure, their various different things, to try to figure out, intellectually, are they active or passive, emotionally active or passive, physically active or passive, a number of different qualities and ways to observe someone else. We can update this, for instance, the Myers-Briggs personality test. We could attempt to think of some friend of ours or someone we know fairly well and try and figure out if they're an introvert, extrovert, judging or perceiving. I forget them all now. My mind's just drawing a blank. Try to analyze them that way. And this is just really to sort of gauge our meter, so to speak, so that we get a measurement, and then to attempt to do that to ourselves, as if we were talking about a separate person, as if we were looking at someone else. So to look at ourselves from an objective perspective. So we start with someone that we know, we attempt to analyze them so that we can then bring it back to ourselves. Another thing we can do is an exercise that Mr. Gurdjieff taught Catherine Hulme, and this is in that typed up notes that's in one of the university libraries called Conversations with Gurdjieff. And in it, he told Catherine Hulme to go through every year of her life and to imagine and represent each year as herself sitting on a chair. So 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, to represent to yourself at every, within every year, something about yourself. He said it's very important to go back and to develop a picture, to develop an understanding of your life. So to, 20 years old, who were you at 20 years old? If you saw 20-year-olds sitting in a chair, what would they look like? What level of being would they have? What thoughts would be in their head? What emotions would they be feeling? If you could take a snapshot or a brief movie of your 20-year-old self that revealed as much as you could about that year, their emotional state, their intellectual state, perhaps the way they were dressed, perhaps the era that they were in and what they looked like and their taste in food. And then another snapshot for 21-year-old and for 22-year-old and for 23 and 24 and 25, to begin to get this historical perspective of yourself. And here, he didn't quite say this with Catherine Mansfield, or not Mansfield, Catherine Hulme. Catherine Mansfield was the writer who died at the Prieuré. I got it mixed up. Catherine Hulme, who actually wrote the Nun story. But what we're really doing as well, by doing that exercise, by imagining ourselves at different points in our life, we are putting ourselves into a second person perspective. So rather than looking out through 20-year-old's eyes, and it can be important to do that, to go back and imagine that you are a 20-year-old sitting in the chair, looking out. What kind of thoughts would you be thinking? What kind of feelings would you be feeling? I was a very different person when I was 20 years old. But to actually begin to gain that objective perspective, to put ourselves into the second person, to see ourselves. So this is something I don't put my clients, for instance, into a chair and imagine themselves at each age, but I have them go back through hypnosis to key points in their life. For instance, if someone has a particular problem, I'll ask them to go back sometime in the last 5 years. They'll be in a deep hypnotic state, and I will talk to their subconscious mind, and I will say, I'm going to count from 5 back to 1. And when I get to 1, I'm going to click my fingers, and I don't want your conscious mind to think about this. I want this to be a subconscious response. So either keep your conscious mind blank or else focus on the word relax, perhaps in yellow letters against the blue backdrop, keeping your conscious mind blank. So this comes up from your subconscious mind. And there's a feeling that has everything to do with why you came to see me. And we're going to trace this feeling back perhaps 5 years. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I start and I say, be there now. First impression, is it daytime or nighttime? And all they have to do is see if it's light or dark. Then I ask them another question, and I push these questions. So I don't give them time. I'm very quick, very pushed, because the subconscious brings it up when it's under that kind of pressure. So first impression, is it daytime or nighttime? Indoors or outdoors? Alone or with someone? With someone, who are you with? And then what age are you? And I get them to pull the memory up. And they pull it up in the first person. And then what happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? I was outside in the backyard, and, my neighbors started yelling at me. And that just made me really mad. And, and I get them to describe it. I write it down. And then I get them to re-experience it in the second person, to gain that inward detachment, to see themselves from an objective perspective. So they see themselves in the scene. And then I go back perhaps, 10 years, then sometime perhaps into their early 20s, then perhaps into their teens around puberty, then to maybe 8 years of age. And then I try and get them to trace this feeling back as far as they can to the first moment they felt this feeling, which the subconscious contains the memory of it. And I take all of these first person memories that are, first person through our eyes, through our ears, as we're experiencing them, and turning them into a second person memory, gaining that objective perspective. And this allows us to really begin to get a sense of our life, of our emotions. It allows us to separate inwardly from our emotions. Mr. Gurdjieff talked about the separation of the self from the self. There's an exercise that he taught, which was called the nightly review. And he said, when you go to bed, imagine, and you can see a movie theater, and imagine you can see your day unspooling backwards and in the second person. So you imagine seeing yourself walking into bed, and then you imagine seeing yourself brushing your teeth, and then you imagine seeing yourself getting that drink of water in the kitchen, and then you imagine seeing yourself getting into your pajamas, and then you imagine seeing yourself, and you see your day unwinding with yourself in the second person. And there's been research that's been done. We haven't proven this with human brains, but our short-term memory, and they've determined this with mice, is put into the hippocampus, which is a horseshoe-shaped part of the brain in the medial brain. It's not the primitive brain, and it's not the advanced neocortex. It's between those two. Our short-term memory is put into the hippocampus, and then during our first sleep cycle, it's unspooled backwards visually into our long-term memory. And so if we do this before we go to bed at night, and we visually and consciously do this work, we are actually saving ourselves from having to do this when we sleep. And Mr. Gurdjieff said the conscious and the subconscious should come into harmony and work together. So he also gave another exercise, which came through J.G. Bennett, where we should sit in a chair and relax our body from the top of our head down to the bottom of our feet. 3 different levels of relaxation for our muscles, large, medium, and small. And then there's a draining exercise that William Nyland recorded or gave out, where we imagine draining tension down our body. I have an exercise online, which is the 3 levels of relaxation, the draining exercise leading to the decision exercise. But if you just listen to the first 22 minutes of that recording rather than the full half hour, it would lead you to that physical state of relaxation. And if you do that before you go to bed and you relax your body completely, that's also something that happens in the first sleep cycle. So by relaxing the body completely, by unspooling our day in the second person backwards, we are doing what we would do in our first sleep cycle, and therefore we're reducing the amount of sleep we need at night. And imagining seeing your day backwards allows you to develop that objectivity about yourself. Imagine seeing yourself in a chair for every year of your life allows you to gain that objective perspective and see yourself in the second person as if you were another person, doing the orage exercise, starting with another person that you know, describing them, and then taking that skill and using it to describe yourself, is putting yourself into the second person, gaining that objective perspective over yourself. Now I have to say, for instance, I have a client, I'm still working with her. She is a very self-aware client. And there's something called German New Medicine. I forget his first name, Reiki, Dr. Hammer. He called it the Derek Hammer syndrome. His son was on a rowboat in a lake in the Alps, I think it was in Switzerland, and someone miles away shot a gun that killed his son, and his son was in his early 20s. And Dr. Hammer came down with testicular cancer 2 months later. And he determined that certain cancers are related to specific types of shock that people experience. And this lady is, using this paradigm to work through breast cancer. And for breast cancer, the shock is a loss, it's a separation. And she had traced it back to, she had developed this real close friendship over many years with a group of coworkers, and they all got laid off. And just the shock of that being laid off, she believes contributed to her breast cancer. Now, she had taken it back to that, that far a few years ago, but through hypnosis, I took it back to a shock that she felt when she was about 35, involving an ex-husband and children. And then I took it back to another shock when she was 22, and she actually got hit when she was pregnant with her child. I took it back to another shock when she was 13, and she had just come to Canada, didn't speak the language, and it was winter, and she was walking down the street. Then I took it to another shock when she lost a dog when she was 9 years old. The dog got ill that day and died. And then another shock to when she was 3 years old and she had moved from one country to another, tracing this chain back, first experiencing it in the first person, and then objectively putting it into the second person so that you can gain that inward separation, that detachment, that distance. So not only is this a profound exercise in self-observation to go back through our life to see ourselves in the second person, it has profound healing implications. I've been doing some research just in the last few days on and I knew about the German New Medicine, Dr. Hammer. I didn't realize how specific it was. Tumors in the lungs the shock is absolute fear. It's terror. Breast cancer, and within certain glands, it's a separation. It's a loss of connection. And, he goes through various different cancers. Bone cancer is a devaluation. And this client started with breast cancer, and then they noticed it had spread to the bones. And for her, it was the pelvic bone. So there was some kind of sexual connotation. It was the right pelvic bone. And, for devaluation, again, I created this chain going back through 4 or 5 points in her life to when she was 2 years old and she got scalded with hot coffee. Her grandmother was there, her mother was there, and her mother smacked her and beat her. And, so this was the initial shock, but the actual shock that, the devaluation, we were able to trace it back and put it into the second person, become aware of it, learn to re-encode that memory in the brain, in the second person, profoundly healing. And so learning to do this with various illnesses, learning to do this and go back through our life to try to understand those shock points in our life is profoundly healing. So doing these exercises, they're not just exercises in getting an objective sense of who we are. It's not just that separation of the self from the self, but within them there's this profound healing component. Going back and tracing our life, thinking of ourselves, what was I like a year ago? How would I represent myself on that chair 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Perhaps get a notepad and a book. And, for me, I'm 61, so 60, 59, 58. Go back and, try to think of the major events that may have shaped me at that point in my life. Try to think of the emotions that may have been dominant within me, represented intellectually, perhaps, emotionally, physically. So, where was I in terms of my thoughts? What would I have described my dominant thought as being? My emotion. What was the dominant negative emotion I was experiencing? The dominant, positive emotion? And tracing ourselves backwards. So not only doing it for our day, seeing our day unspooling visually backwards as if it were on a movie screen, but unspooling our life backwards. This is something, Mr. Gurdjieff did with Uspensky and Anna Butowski and the original 6, the group of 6 that he had in St. Petersburg. He also had a group in Moscow. But when he began working with Uspensky, he began with a group of 6. And there was a doctor there. And I guess being a doctor, you're used to putting on this mask that you know everything of competence. You want to communicate that. And Mr. Gurdjieff, Anna Butowski talks about how disappointed Mr. Gurdjieff was in the doctor, and he made the doctor aware of it. And, you know, maybe, doctor, someday you will be able to do this properly, because he tried to get all the members of that group to honestly and objectively talk about their early life. He wanted them to come to the group and be honest and reflect their weaknesses, their faults, to talk about themselves from an objective perspective, to gain that distance, and to do it without involving the ego or the sense of self-importance. The ego will always mask our faults. The ego will always put us sort of, in the best light possible. You know, the ego is Monsieur Self-Love and Madame Vanity, and it's this protective mechanism that really prevents us from seeing ourselves as we really are. So to do this exercise, to try to do it objectively. You know, you don't have to share it. The ego can keep it hidden, but to try and to develop this objective understanding of ourselves. There've been numerous anecdotal reports and reports over the years that we see our life flash before our eyes when we die. A drowning person sees their life flash before their eyes. And Mr. Gurdjieff, and not just Mr. Gurdjieff, but this is a current that flows through all esoteric and mystical teachings. The fact that we have to die before we die. So if this is something that happens when we die, if our life flashes before our eyes, and when you think about it, your life flashing before your eyes, there's an objective second person element just in that description. Your life flashes before your eyes. So you go back and it's like you unspool your life. You go back through your life. If we do that while we are still healthy, while we are still alive, while we are still breathing and embodied, isn't that dying before we die? We can get even more complex. People who have had near-death experiences, NDEs, this is becoming more common with modern medicine. Before, if someone had a heart attack, they would have died. Now they have a heart attack and you put a defibrillator on them and you shock their heart back to life. Now they can be in an emergency room and doctors can bring them back to life. And, you know, some of them have gone to the light, they've had experiences, but something that's also very, very common is they not only see their life flash before their eyes, but they also experience the pain they caused other people by stepping into the other person's reality. So if you were really mean to someone, you experience that meanness that the other person felt. And this is actually Mr. Gurdjieff's definition of remorse of conscience. You know, he said, for exercises of remorse of conscience, start with your parents. Go back to a moment when you were particularly mean and ungrateful and you hurt one of your parents. And then go back and experience that hurt you caused them from their perspective. So you see yourself yelling at them. You see yourself as being mean and ungrateful. Again, there's that separation of the self from the self, seeing yourself in the second person, but even more in the case of remorse of conscience, you see yourself in the second person, but you experience the hurt that you caused your parent. And in that, there's a certain digestion, there's a certain releasing, there's a certain opening up. So these aren't just ways to objectively perceive ourselves. They're ways of dying before we die. There are ways of experiencing remorse of conscience, of experiencing the pain we caused other people while we're still very much in our body. There are ways of releasing that intrapsychic emotional pressure from our subconscious that can lead to disease and illness. So it has so many profound connotations, so many profound levels of healing involved in this. It's not just purely an abstract exercise. It has all of these other ramifications involved. Any questions, any comments so far at this point? Anything anyone want to say? I wish you could talk, Ian. I would ask you because I know you would say something. Sana, any comments?
I mean, I was thinking about what you were saying, and I've heard it also in the Islamic tradition. They describe these things when you go back and experience the things you did to others, or even if you did a suicide, you go back and experience the thing one or two or three times. You experience it. So I was kind of understanding the real meaning that came with it and how powerful it is. I totally believe in
that. There's something actually called the Vine of the Dead. It's a drink that is a psychedelic brew that they make in South America. And I've talked to a few people it's called ayahuasca, who've gone to a shamanic ayahuasca service in Peru, and they've taken the drink and they've gone back, and they haven't experienced all of the pain that they caused, but they've experienced from the loved one's perspective the pain that they caused that person through their behavior. And this is, when I heard that, I thought, this is remorse of conscience. So we're building up not just this objective perspective, we're building up to attempting to experience the hurt and the pain that we caused people. I remember one particular time I wounded my dad badly with words. I was like 19 years old, and I just yelled at him. And, remorse of conscience. I've tried to go back into that moment to see my 19-year-old self just, being so negative, being so dark, so cutting, so mean, and to experience it through his eyes, through his feeling, to feel his pain, to look at me and feel that pain. And that was a very hard one for me to do, to go back and realize that that moment of devastation, I caused someone that I just absolutely adored and loved. And in that moment, I was just this, snarky, surly teenager. So, this is, it's so healing, so powerful. Reggie, do you have any comments on this? You can speak.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but I don't have any comments. I mean,
No.
Then it's good. It's clear. Thanks.
Okay. I don't know if, Rania, her microphone's turned off.
Yes.
Oh, do you have any comments on this, Rania?
Well, I can now say after 4 or 5 weeks of doing the practicing and the presence and the breathing thing, I can say that I feel different.
Okay.
And I can now catch myself whenever I want to dwell. I can catch myself and bring myself back. And it's really helping me. We have to pray like 5 times a day. And I usually, whenever I used to pray, my mind would think of other things and try to come back. And it wasn't that easy. But now I feel that whenever I start the prayers, that I am already in my body.
Yeah.
And I am focusing. I don't have to fight myself. So I feel different.
Well, that's good. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
And I always hear your voice.
Oh no. That's the problem with being a hypnotherapist, is a lot of times my clients hear my voice inside their head.
Yes.
And it's like, Allan, relax your body, breathe, and it's my voice. I wish it was.
I swear the other day, even I heard your voice in my sleep.
Oh no.
But it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because your voice is very calming. So it's very good.
Okay. Comments. That's again. And I know Ian, I could get comments out of Ian. Because I keep on, it's like I'm repeating the same thing over and over again. But try to think about ourselves yesterday. What was if you had to take your emotional temperature yesterday, emotionally, where were you? Physically, what was your physical body like yesterday? Yesterday I was really exhausted. Yesterday I felt really depleted. I'd done something very hectic that required a lot of energy the night before. And I went to restorative yoga yesterday at 3 p.m. And restorative yoga is you do 10 minutes in one posture and 10 minutes in another, and they twist us like pretzels. And I was just, like exhausted. I was emotionally drained. My mind wasn't working. It wasn't not working, but my mind was just sort of in a holding zone. And emotionally, I felt drained. Physically, I felt exhausted. If I went back to Friday, I was in a more meditative state. I was in a more prayerful state. I was more into my body, more developing that physical awareness. And on Friday, I was more into trying to bring higher emotions into myself, trying to use my eyes to bring higher emotions. And I talked about to someone in my Tuesday night group, to an exercise I was taught when I was in a Bennett group, was to imagine a silk thread being pulled in and out your heart as you breathe, and to be breathing in a higher emotion. And so I was trying to do that on Friday. I was trying to feel delight coming in and then out as an exquisite thread. So emotionally on Friday, I was trying my best. And it wasn't the whole day, but trying to experience that feeling, trying to bring a sense of delight into my eyes, into my face, trying to physically really get into the physical dimension of my body. If I go back the day before that, I was a little bit more harried. I had clients. I felt like I was one step behind, getting ready for things, having to, too many commitments. And so My qualitative feeling that day was slightly different. My mind was a little bit more racing. And I didn't sleep that well the night before, so I was a bit more exhausted. And to try to, get the emotional flavor, the emotional temperature of the day, how I felt physically in my body, how I felt within my thoughts, to try to encapsulate that, in a brief snippet, and to reflect back on our lives. When we go back year by year, going back into our childhood, what was our dominant negative emotion as a child? I know that for me, my dominant negative emotion was anger. And around the age of 11, I learned to suppress the anger. So it became suppressed anger. And I remember the exact moment I learned to suppress the anger. I got so angry, and I'm not sure if I was 11 years old, but I got so angry. I destroyed everything in my room. And I had, toys and things. And then at the end of it, when I calmed down, I thought, but I love that toy. And I said, I'm never going to do that again. And at that point, there was still the anger, but rather than being expressed, it became suppressed. Now, I also know that, things like depression, and I suffered from depression as a teenager. Depression can be a primary emotion, or it can be a secondary emotion. As a secondary emotion, it's a protective emotion. So you're driving, some of you will have no experience of this, but in Canada, in the winter time, it can get very icy. You're driving along and you slide off the road down a hill and you put your foot on the gas pedal and go, and your wheels just spin. And if you don't take your foot off the gas pedal, you will blow your engine. And depression is taking your foot off the gas pedal. It prevents you from blowing the engine. So if you are angry, the anger can lead to depression, because if you stay angry and you stay in that state, it will wear you down and cause real problems. So you slip into depression. So to also look back into our childhood, what was your emotional flavor? What negative emotion? And, there are three primary emotions. Love is more cerebral, peace is more physical, and joy is more emotional. The opposite of love is anger. Not hate, it's anger. The opposite of peace is fear. The opposite of joy is despair. What dominant negative emotion, what qualitative feeling negatively did you experience before the age of 5? Can you think back to before the age of 5? Can you think back to memories before the age of 5? Can you become aware of the emotional flavor of those memories? Did you feel angry? Did you feel despairing? Did you feel fearful? Now, I say we have a dominant negative emotion, but we've experienced all of these emotions. Every emotion that we currently feel is a re-feeling of something we previously felt. This is contained in Views from the Real World. Mr. Gurdjieff's listed as the author, but he didn't write that book. It was compiled by Madame de Salzmann after he died. She asked all of his students to send her lecture notes and notes that they took, not at meetings with him because he wouldn't allow it, but they would run outside as soon as the meeting was over and, write down notes and compare them and come up with what he said. And in that, he talked about, emotional levers within us and how we haven't experienced a new feeling since approximately the age of 8. So every time we currently feel anger or despair or fear, it's a re-feeling of something we felt before the age of 8. He said our emotional center is complete by the age of 8, and then from that age to about 18, we can move things around in the emotional center, but we can't create new emotions. With one proviso, it is possible to create new feelings. And for instance, this is one of the purposes of Gurdjieff movements, to get the body to move and with the attention to open ourselves, for instance, or example, to higher feelings. But it's very difficult to create new feelings after the age of 18. So every feeling that we have is a re-feeling of something we previously felt. This is why my client who had breast cancer, and she traced it back to a shock a few years ago. I took it back to a shock that happened to her when she was 3.5. A separation, a disconnection, because I know emotions go back. I know that most problems with feelings go back before the age of 5. So what was your dominant emotional temperature before the age of 5? So again, as I said earlier, all of this observing ourselves, this putting ourselves into the second person has numerous benefits. Not only does it allow us to die before we die, it also allows us to begin to heal ourselves. So many problems physically are a result of our emotions getting trapped in the first person. So a similar experience promotes anxiety or something within ourselves, and learning where the anxiety came from, trying to figure out the causal experience of the anxiety and growing that memory in the second person, that detached perspective, seeing yourself on that chair is what heals that emotion. It allows it to begin to flow again. It allows us to begin to move back and forth. Instead of it being stuck and trapped in the first person, it gives us that flexibility and that mobility. So self-observation is such an important part of the mystical path. It plays a really, really important role in the Gurdjieff teachings. When we begin to observe ourselves, when we begin to realize where our energies are leaking, where they've gotten blocked, when we begin to free that energy up, that energy then allows us to develop at the higher levels. It allows us to spend more and more and more time in the mindful state. If we look at ourselves as 3-story energy factories, we're actually going down into the lowest stories, figuring out where those blockages and leakages occur and fixing them. And as we fix them, we conserve that energy, and that energy then can be used to develop our being at the higher level and to become more mindful and to live in a state of a more awakened state. Because it's all about the transformation of energies. It's all about healing ourselves, conserving energy, which then we can then use to develop ourselves at the higher level. At any rate, I want to thank you all for being here today. Hopefully next time, Ian, we'll be able to talk to you. You have great questions and great insight. Sana, Reggie, Guido, Heina, all of you, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Alan.
Bye.
See you next week.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.